Every F-150 buyer eventually faces the same question. Do you go with the 5.0-liter Coyote V8, the engine that sounds like a truck and feels like a truck? Or do you choose the 3.5-liter EcoBoost that Ford's marketing team won't stop talking about? I've spent the last several years tracking two nearly identical F-150s through 100,000 miles of real-world use, logging every repair bill, every fuel receipt, every maintenance interval, and every mechanical failure along the way. The results are not what most people expect, and the winner isn't the engine most buyers assume it will be. Here is what the 5.0 Coyote V8 actually is at 100,000 miles. The Coyote has been around long enough that we have a thorough understanding of what it does well and where it struggles over time. It is a 5.0-liter naturally aspirated V8 producing 400 horsepower and 410 pound-feet of torque in current F-150 trim. No turbochargers, no intercoolers, no boost pressure, just displacement and atmospheric air doing what they have always done in American trucks. That simplicity is the engine's greatest strength, and it is also the source of its most significant limitation. By the 100,000-mile mark on the test truck, the Coyote had required a timing chain tensioner replacement at 87,000 miles. This is a known issue with the 5.0-liter, particularly in trucks that spend significant time idling or that run through extended periods of stop-and-go driving. The repair came to $1,200 at a shop rate, though it would have been higher at a dealership. Outside of that repair, the Coyote needed oil changes, a serpentine belt at 75,000 miles, spark plugs at 60,000 miles as a precaution, and a thermostat housing replacement at 93,000 miles due to a coolant leak. Total unscheduled repair costs over 100,000 miles came to approximately $2,100 for this specific truck. Fuel economy on the Coyote averaged 16.8 miles per gallon across the full 100,000 miles of mixed city and highway driving. That number reflects real driving with real loads, not a highway-only cruise designed to hit EPA estimates. The Coyote's naturally aspirated design means fuel economy does not change dramatically based on driving style or conditions. You get roughly what you get, and that consistency is actually one of the engine's underappreciated strengths. You can predict what a tank of gas will cost you with reasonable accuracy, and that predictability has value for budget planning. The Coyote's power delivery is linear and immediate. There is no turbo spool, no lag between your right foot and the engine's response, and that character makes the truck feel genuinely athletic in a way that connects the driver to the experience. At highway speeds, the engine runs relaxed and quiet. At wide open throttle, it makes a sound that the EcoBoost simply cannot replicate. For buyers who care about the sensory experience of driving, the Coyote is a substantially more satisfying engine to live with every day. Towing with the Coyote over 100,000 miles held no dramatic surprises. The test truck towed a 7,500-pound boat trailer regularly, and the engine handled it without complaint. Transmission temperatures stayed within acceptable ranges when tow haul mode was engaged consistently. The transmission itself required no service beyond fluid changes at the manufacturer-recommended intervals, and no shifting anomalies developed through the entire test period. The Coyote may not produce maximum numbers on paper, but it tows in a calm, unhurried way that experienced towers find reassuring. If you're finding this analysis useful already, hit that like button and subscribe now, because the EcoBoost data gets far more complicated, and the numbers are going to surprise you either way. Here is what the 3.5-liter EcoBoost actually looked like at 100,000 miles. The 3.5-liter EcoBoost is a twin turbocharged direct injection V6 producing 400 horsepower and 500 pound-feet of torque in its current form. Those torque numbers are what Ford's sales team leads with, and they're real. The EcoBoost makes peak torque at 2,500 revolutions per minute, which means it is pulling hard before the tachometer even gets warm. In a truck context where you are launching heavy loads from stops or climbing grades with a trailer, that low revolutions per minute torque is genuinely useful and immediately noticeable compared to a naturally aspirated engine. The 100,000-mile repair history on the EcoBoost test truck is where the conversation gets complicated. At 52,000 miles, the truck developed the cold start rattle that plagues a significant percentage of EcoBoost F-150s. That rattle is the sound of cam phasers operating without adequate oil pressure in the first few seconds after startup. The cam phaser system uses variable valve timing to optimize performance and efficiency, but the design is sensitive to oil pressure fluctuations and to the quality of the oil maintaining it. The repair at 52,000 miles required replacement of the cam phasers, timing chains, chain guides, and tensioners on both cylinder banks. Total cost came to $4,200 at a Ford dealership. This is a known issue. Ford has issued technical service bulletins related to cam phaser noise and performance on EcoBoost engines, and the repair shows up consistently in high-mileage EcoBoost owner communities. The trucks most affected tend to share common factors: owners who used conventional oil instead of full synthetic, owners who extended oil change intervals beyond 7,500 miles, and owners who used the auto start-stop system extensively, which causes repeated oil pressure drops at every restart. Two of those three factors were present in the test truck's maintenance history, which contributed to the early onset of the problem. Beyond the cam phasers, the EcoBoost test truck required intercooler hose replacement at 61,000 miles after a boost leak developed that caused a noticeable loss of power and an illuminated check engine light. The repair cost $380 in parts and labor. Turbocharger inspection at 95,000 miles showed acceptable bearing condition with no shaft play, which is a positive sign, but the inspection itself cost $200 in diagnostic time. A spark plug replacement interval of 60,000 miles is standard on the EcoBoost, and the tight packaging of the engine makes access difficult enough that labor costs are higher than on naturally aspirated engines. The plug replacement came to $340 in labor alone. Total unscheduled repair costs on the EcoBoost over 100,000 miles came to approximately $5,400, more than double the Coyote's repair bill over the same mileage and driving conditions. Fuel economy on the EcoBoost averaged 19.6 miles per gallon across the full 100,000 miles of mixed driving. That is 2.8 miles per gallon better than the Coyote, and at 100,000 miles of driving, that difference adds up to a meaningful number. Over 100,000 miles at an average fuel price of $3.40 per gallon, the Coyote consumed approximately 5,952 gallons at a total fuel cost of roughly $20,237. The EcoBoost consumed approximately 5,102 gallons at a total fuel cost of roughly $17,347. The EcoBoost saved approximately $2,890 in fuel over 100,000 miles of real-world mixed driving. That's a real advantage that doesn't disappear on paper. But then subtract the $3,300 repair cost difference between the two engines over the same period, and the EcoBoost's fuel savings are entirely consumed by its higher repair bills, with roughly $400 left over in favor of the Coyote when you net everything out. That calculation is specific to these two trucks, these maintenance histories, and these driving patterns, and it will vary for every owner. But it tells an important story about the total cost of ownership picture that fuel economy numbers alone completely obscure. Subscribe if you haven't yet and hit the bell, because the towing comparison over 100,000 miles reveals something about the EcoBoost that Ford's engineers designed in deliberately but never advertised directly. Here is what 100,000 miles of towing showed about both engines. Towing is where the two engines reveal their fundamental character differences most clearly, and the data from 100,000 miles of regular towing tells a story that no spec sheet can capture. Both test trucks towed the same categories of loads over the same terrain, including a boat trailer, a car trailer, and a loaded construction trailer at various intervals throughout the test period. The differences in the towing experience were consistent and significant. The EcoBoost's torque advantage at low RPM makes it genuinely easier to launch heavy loads from stops and to maintain highway speed on grades without downshifting as aggressively. When you're merging onto a highway with 8,000 pounds behind you, the EcoBoost's turbo torque feels effortless in a way the Coyote's linear power delivery doesn't quite match. The truck pulls like it isn't towing anything, at least until you hit a steep enough grade that the laws of physics override the sensation. For daily towing in flat to moderately hilly terrain, the EcoBoost's low RPM torque is a real and meaningful advantage that experienced towers genuinely appreciate. However, extended towing on grades and in hot ambient temperatures revealed the EcoBoost's thermal sensitivity. The twin turbos add significant heat to the engine bay, and under sustained heavy towing load in summer heat, underhood temperatures climb faster and stay higher than in the Coyote. Intercooler efficiency drops as ambient temperatures rise, which reduces boost pressure and partially erodes the power advantage at exactly the moment you need it most. The Coyote, with no turbochargers adding heat to the equation, runs a cooler and more consistent engine bay temperature under the same conditions. Transmission behavior under towing also differed between the two trucks in ways that became more apparent over time. The EcoBoost's torque output places higher demands on the transmission, particularly during aggressive towing applications. By 80,000 miles, the EcoBoost test truck showed slightly more transmission wear, as evidenced by fluid condition at drain intervals, with the fluid appearing darker and carrying a faintly burnt odor at the 80,000 mile change compared to the Coyote's fluid at the same interval. Neither truck required a transmission repair during the test period, but the EcoBoost's transmission was working harder throughout. The Coyote produced less torque, but placed that torque on the drivetrain more gently, and the transmission wear reflected that difference. For buyers who tow at or near maximum capacity regularly, the EcoBoost's torque advantage is real and valuable. For buyers who tow moderate loads occasionally, the Coyote's simpler drivetrain stress profile is worth considering in the context of long-term reliability. Here is the maintenance reality that most buyers do not calculate before they choose. The EcoBoost's maintenance requirements are meaningfully more demanding than the Coyote's, and the consequences of deviating from those requirements are steeper. The EcoBoost requires full synthetic oil at every change, and it requires those changes no later than 7,500 miles under normal conditions, with 5,000-mile intervals recommended for owners who tow regularly, idle frequently, or operate in extreme heat. Running conventional oil in an EcoBoost is not a best practice. It is a path toward the cam phaser failure that cost $4,200 in this test. Running an EcoBoost past its oil change interval is similarly inadvisable in a way that does not apply to the Coyote with the same severity. The Coyote is more forgiving of maintenance lapses. Running conventional oil in a Coyote at normal driving conditions is not ideal, but the naturally aspirated design and port injection system mean the consequences develop more slowly. Carbon buildup on intake valves is not an issue for the Coyote the way it is for the direct injection EcoBoost, because port injection washes the backs of the valves with every cycle. The EcoBoost's direct injection system injects fuel directly into the combustion chamber, bypassing the intake valves entirely, which means those valves accumulate carbon deposits that the Coyote simply does not experience at the same rate. The carbon buildup issue on the EcoBoost required an induction service at 70,000 miles on the test truck at a cost of $320. Rough idle at light throttle and a slight hesitation during cold starts were the symptoms that triggered the service. After the induction cleaning, both symptoms disappeared immediately. This service does not exist as a requirement on the Coyote because the port injection design prevents the problem from occurring in the first place. For EcoBoost owners who want to minimize this issue, walnut blasting of the intake valves every 40,000 to 60,000 miles is the most effective approach, at a cost of $300 to $600 each time depending on the shop. That is a recurring maintenance cost that Coyote owners simply never face. Here is the honest verdict after 100,000 miles of side-by-side data. The answer to which engine wins is more nuanced than the internet debates usually allow for, but the data from 100,000 miles of real-world operation points toward a clear conclusion for the majority of F-150 buyers. If you prioritize total cost of ownership, long-term mechanical simplicity, and predictable reliability without demanding maintenance discipline, the 5.0-liter Coyote V8 is the better engine at 100,000 miles and beyond. The repair cost advantage over the EcoBoost in this test was substantial. The maintenance requirements are less demanding. The consequences of imperfect maintenance are less severe. The engine has no turbochargers, no intercoolers, no cam phaser oil pressure sensitivity, and no direct injection carbon buildup to manage. It is a fundamentally simpler machine, and at 100,000 miles, that simplicity shows up directly in the bank account. If you prioritize fuel economy above other factors, the EcoBoost's advantage is real, but it gets significantly diluted by higher repair costs when any of the engine's known failure points materialize. The $2,890 fuel savings over 100,000 miles looks compelling in isolation, but it doesn't survive contact with a $4,200 cam phaser repair. Owners who maintain the EcoBoost perfectly, use full synthetic oil at short intervals, disable auto start-stop, avoid extended idling, and run premium fuel consistently will have a better ownership experience than the test truck delivered. But that level of maintenance discipline is not realistic for most owners, and the engine's design is less forgiving of the lapses that inevitably occur over a decade of real-world use. If you tow at or near the F-150's maximum capacity regularly, and your terrain is hilly or mountainous, the EcoBoost's torque advantage is meaningful enough to consider seriously. The low RPM pull is genuinely useful when you're asking the truck to work hard from a stop with a heavy trailer. For moderate occasional towing on relatively flat ground, the Coyote is more than adequate and carries lower long-term risk. The buyers who will be happiest with the EcoBoost are the ones who go in with full awareness of what the engine demands and then actually meet those demands consistently. The buyers who will be happiest with the Coyote are the ones who want a truck that rewards reasonable care without requiring meticulous attention, and who don't mind visiting the gas station slightly more often in exchange for a simpler and more forgiving mechanical picture over the long term. 100,000 miles of data doesn't lie. The Coyote was cheaper to own, simpler to maintain, and delivered a more predictable ownership experience. The EcoBoost was faster, more efficient on fuel, and more capable under heavy towing loads. In the total cost of ownership calculation that most buyers should actually be running when they choose an engine, the Coyote came out ahead, and that result held even after accounting for every fuel receipt over the entire test period. Make your decision based on that data, not on the spec sheet, and not on which engine your salesperson pushes hardest at the dealership. Both engines are capable trucks. One of them is a simpler long-term proposition, and 100,000 miles makes that clear. If this comparison gave you information that changes how you're thinking about your next F-150, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and drop a comment telling me which engine is in your truck and whether you choose differently knowing this data. Share this with anyone who's on the fence about the engine choice. That decision is one of the most expensive you'll make at the dealership. I'll see you in the next one.